Hello, welcome to another screencast where we'll be talking about blood cell formation or a process called hematopoiesis. So hematopoiesis, again, is the formation of red blood cells. So or not just red blood cells, but all red blood, or all blood cells. So by the end of this, you should be able to describe and explain the process of hematopoiesis and what factors will affect hematopoiesis, and then a little more detail about the roles of hemocytoblasts, what erythropoietin is, briefly about interleukins, and then thrombopoietin. Okay, so let's get started here. In the skeleton is where red blood cells, or sorry, all blood cells are formed. I keep saying red blood cells. All blood cells are formed in red marrow. Okay, so the red marrow is the site of hematopoiesis. So in the red marrow is hematopoiesis. So where is the red marrow? Well, in young bones, the red marrow is found in this medullary cavity of the long bones, right? That is a bone like the femur, right? So this is a little section through the femur right here. But when you now, like basically an adult, your femurs look like this, right? And so this medullary cavity is just full of yellow marrow, which is primarily fat. So in fetuses and newborns, you have the bones looking like this, right? And the red marrow is there. But as you age, the red marrow then is restricted to primarily flat bones. So this is a flat bone, and there's this compact bone. It's like a little sandwich, compact bone, and then this cancellous bone right here is also known as spongy bone. Right? And if you zoom in on this right here, this is what you would see. It's this network, and all these blank spaces in here is where the red marrow would be. So an adult bone, this cancellous bone, is here and say the head of the femur right there. But the primary location in the adult is where the flat bones are. So you have lots of red marrow in the bones of the skull, in the sternum, and then also the hip area. And of those three, the hip area is where, if you were doing a blood marrow transplant or a bone marrow transplant, you would be taking it from the hip area right there. Okay, so this is where those cells that are going to be undergoing hematopoiesis are going to be located. So speaking of those cells, what are the cells? Well, all blood cells, the title up here, all blood cells differentiate from a hemocytoblast stem cell that's in the red bone marrow. So lots of cells on this slide right here, but I want to just call your attention first off to this one right up here. You don't have to know the names of all these cells, by the way. Stem cell, hemocytoblast. So a stem cell is simply a cell that is undifferentiated. That means it has not become a specific type of cell yet. So undifferentiated cell right there. And that it's a hemocytoblast, right? This blast ending, right, means that the cell is going to become something, or it builds another type of cell, or it's producing something. So that's what this blast means, that it's a pregenitor cell or progenitor cell. It's going to become something different. The root cyto, of course, means cell. And then the hemo prefix here means blood. So a hemocytoblast is a blood cell that is going to become something, right? Or a cell that's going to build other red blood cells. So what we say here is that as we move from the top of this diagram to the bottom of the diagram, where we see our blood cell types, right here are our erythrocytes, or the red blood cells. Here are the leukocytes, right? Or the white blood cells, of which there are 5 different flavors. Right? So these are the white blood cells here. And then you have the thrombocytes, or the platelets, right, down here. So erythrocytes, leukocytes, and thrombocytes are all what we say that they are all derived from a hemocytoblast cell. We could also then say the other direction, that the hemocytoblast will give rise to the erythrocytes, hemocytoblast gives rise to leukocytes, hemocytoblast gives rise to thrombocytes. Okay? So if we follow this lineage down, we can get this stem cell to become, if we go this way, it is going to ultimately become an erythrocyte. If it goes any one of these pathways, it's going to become a leukocyte, a white blood cell of some sort. And if it goes down this pathway, then it becomes a platelet or a thrombocyte. Right? So the question is, well, how does this stem cell know, right, which one to become? Well, the answer is signals. Right? And these signals are chemicals in the plasma of the blood. Okay? So we'll talk about the chemicals here in just a minute. But different chemicals, a different signal would signal this hemocytoblast to differentiate and become an erythrocyte or a leukocyte or a thrombocyte. Right? So let's look at some of those different situations here. Actually, that's just from your textbook. So if you look at this, erythropoietin, we're going to get the example here of how does the hemocytoblast know to become a red blood cell. Right? So let's just focus on that left part of that previous diagram. So how do I know to make more red blood cells? Well, there's got to be some sort of stimulus, okay? And so the stimulus might be, one here, decreased red blood cell count. So why might you have fewer red blood cells? So you might have fewer red blood cells because you're losing them, you're hemorrhaging, you might be anemic. Why else might you be having a lower red blood cell count? You might have some sort of disease that makes your red blood cell counts lower. Right? That is going to stimulate you to make more red blood cells. What if number two, another stimulus, you have decreased availability of O2 to the blood? Right? This is a condition called hypoxia. Hypo, lower, oxia, oxygen. So this is a condition called hypoxia. So you might be hypoxic if you are at altitude, if you're being asphyxiated, if you're being choked or something like that, asphyxiated. So the decreased availability of O2 there to the blood, you're having breathing issues, right? Circulation issues could also make you hypoxic, or even increased tissue demand for O2. Number three, this would be another stimulus. Right? In this example, would something be like exercise? Whoops. Exercise will also get an increase in red blood cell production. So these stimuli here are detected. Right? So we have lower oxygen levels in the blood for some reason. That is detected by the kidney, detected by specialized cells in the kidney, and then the kidney releases erythropoietin. Erythropoietin is a chemical. It's a signal. Specifically, it's a hormone. And that hormone, erythropoietin here, which is also known as EPO. So EPO, or erythropoietin, is going to stimulate the red bone marrow. Well, specifically, which cells of the red bone marrow is it going to stimulate? Well, the ones that are in this cancellous bone right here should actually be a flat bone. But the specific cells, of course, are the hemocytoblasts. So the hemocytoblast cell here. Now, a little more specifics than your textbook deals with. So these hemocytoblasts have receptors on their surface. So this is a receptor. Right? And let's say that erythropoietin, this hormone, has this shape. Right? So now erythropoietin can fit in that receptor right there. And this is how the signaling works, is that when erythropoietin, the signal binds to the receptor, that binding causes this hemocytoblast to then derive and go down the erythrocyte pathway, right? And you then enhance erythropoiesis, right? So this then, right, and we'll have several arrows here. So this hemocytoblast will then will give rise to these red blood cells. Right? Then you have more red blood cells, increased O2 carrying capability of the blood. Right? So this is the erythropoietin. What else is happening is, how do I get more platelets? Well, another hormone called thrombopoietin. Thrombopoietin has, let's give it this shape, and so those thrombopoietin receptors are also on the hemocytoblast. So if the platelet levels are low for some reason, if there's an imbalance here, low platelet levels, then thrombopoietin is going to be produced. Thrombopoietin binds to this receptor, and when thrombopoietin binds to this receptor, that causes the hemocytoblast to then go down the far right part of that diagram, and you end up getting this hemocytoblast giving rise to thrombocytes. And lastly, you have, if your white blood cells are low, this is going to signal interleukins. These are chemical molecules that are going to stimulate white blood cell production, and so the interleukins, we can give them sort of just a square shape. And then these hemocytoblasts, of course, are going to have receptors that have this shape on them, and so the interleukin would bind, and then this hemocytoblast would give rise to white blood cells. Okay? So this is the basic pattern going on here. And I think that's about it. So you should be able to here describe and explain hematopoiesis and some factors that are going to affect hematopoiesis, and then being able to describe roles of, in general, what hemocytoblasts are, when and what erythropoietin is used for, interleukins, and thrombopoietin. Okay. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please bring them to class.